Hi again, my name is Heather from the World Bank, and this session I'm going to be showing you how to join in a new ball of yarn, either a new color or another ball that's the same color as what you're already using. And then we'll talk a bit more, then I'll cast off my swatch here, and that's called binding off, and we'll show you how to kind of make a nice clean edge on the end once you're finished with your finished object. And then I'll show you how to weave in the extra ends here. So even at the beginning you have an extra end, but you also have a tail once you cast off, and I'll show you how to hide those so your finished object doesn't unravel. And then once you're completed all of that and you've cast off everything, typically we will wash and block a finished object so that it kind of evens out all your stitches or any imperfections, and I'll show you explain how to do that a little bit more in this session. Okay, so since our last session, I kind of extended this swatch. This would be like what a normal swatch would look like if you're trying to measure your gauge, which I'm sure we'll go over in more detail in another session. But you kind of do this to see, how your yarn grows when you are, prepping for a sweater or things like that. So this would be, a nice large swatch that you could make to test out garter stitch. And this is kind of what the finished object looks like. You see how both sides look the same for garter stitch. So that's how that's going. And then today, like I mentioned, we're going to cover how to add in new yarn. So you might finish a ball of yarn and then need to start a new one. So that would just be the same color and you would be adding in a new ball of yarn. But for clarity's sake, we're going to use a new color just so you can see it more clearly. So to start, and you could do that in a certain pattern as well. It could call for you to change colors midway through your work. So if you were going to do that, first you would cut off the ball that you're using, and you want to leave a decent tail so that you can weave that in at the end. So you just put that there. And then find the beginning of this new ball here. We can set this aside. And now you can see we have our tail here. We're not going to be using that again. And then we have the start of the new ball of yarn. And to get going, you just insert your empty needle, your right hand needle, into the first stitch like you're going to knit. And then kind of just wrap this string of yarn around your needle. So you're kind of making like a little stitch there. It looks a little weird, not like a normal stitch, but you just wrap it around your right hand needle. Pull it through like normal. Drop that stitch. And then kind of tighten the tail here. And then pull this a little so it's not so loose. And then really the important part is the next stitch. So you want to make sure you're using the working yarn, the one that's connected to the ball and not the tail. And you just wrap it around like a normal stitch. And then this is when you want to tighten everything up. So you pull that tail, pull your working yarn, and that kind of makes sure everything is a little less loose. And then you can just continue the row with your new color. And you knit like normal. Wrapping around the needle, pull through the gap here, and drop the stitch on the left. And then we'll just kind of fast forward to the end of the row, but you're just knitting all the way across with your new color, staying in the stitch pattern that you're working with. So with garter stitch, you're just knitting all the way across, and we're just using the new color instead. Okay, and nothing different about the last stitch, just a knit. And then there you go. You can see you have the first row of pink. It is a little loose on the end, but when you weave in the ends, you can tighten all of that up a bit more too. And I'll show you how to do that later on in this session. Okay, so I did a couple more rows here, and I just stayed in garter stitch. So since we're knitting flat, I knit all the way across on one side and then all the way across again on the other side. This is kind of a more clear example of the right side versus the wrong side of knitting. So you can see how nice the line is here where you joined in your new yarn. This is the right side of the work. But here you can see a little bump that shows through on the back of the work, and that's the wrong side. And that happens when you're joining in garter stitch. It'll have this one extra little line, but usually if it's like inside of a sweater, you won't see it, or on the other side that you're not showing off as much, that'll show up there. But so we're back here and kind of got a nice square. This could be the end of my swatch, or it could be like a little pot holder or something like that, whatever you might want to use it for. So at this point I'm going to start casting off. So that's when we take all of our stitches off of the needle and bind them off so they have a nice edge and they don't unravel. So to start that, we are going to knit the first 2 stitches like normal. And then it's a pretty easy process. You're just gonna use your left hand needle to pick up the stitch that's the furthest on the right, the first stitch you knit, and you bring it up and over the second stitch. And so you see how it kind of just looped over there, and now you only have 1 stitch on your right needle at this point. So you can see you've reduced your stitches by 1 already. And then you repeat this process over and over again until you reach the end of the row. So we want to get 2 stitches on this side again, so we knit 1 more. Now you have 2 on your right needle, so we're going to pull our first stitch over the one you just knit, drop it there, and now you're back to 1 stitch, and you can see you're making an edge right there. So we continue this process where I knit 1, pull the first stitch over the one you just knit, drop it, and keep going. You want to try not to do this too tightly, or your edge could be a little puckered and not as stretchy. So you kind of want to stay as loose as possible and not tug the yarn as much. That'll kind of help things. It's more important for if you're casting off like a sock or something like that, or something that you have to fit over something else. You have 2 stitches on the right needle. You pull the first one over the one you just knit and drop it. Still have some more to go, but your bind off edge is looking nice. That's what we have so far. So we're getting close to the end, but you still continue to do the same process. So we have knit that and pull this over, and then we're going to knit the last stitch like normal, and then now you have 2 stitches on the end on your right needle, and so you do the same thing. You pull the first one over the second one, and then now you just have 1 stitch left and you have nothing else you can do at this point, nothing else to knit. So how you finish this off, just kind of leave that one stitch there. You cut your yarn at this point, leaving a tail of at least like 4 inches. And then easy way to do this is you just start pulling your yarn through, and then now you see it's caught in a little loop here, and it'll hold itself together, and then you weave in the end to tighten it up, make sure it doesn't unravel. So that is how you bind off your work. And then in this case, we started binding off on the right side of the work, but your pattern will tell you whenever to start binding off. And in this case, we started on the right side of your work. Okay, so we just finished up our swatch, like I said. We cast it off the edge, and I'll show you just a bit closer. This is the finished product. It's a nice kind of chain look at the very end when you cast off this way, but there are multiple ways you can cast off. And it'll look different. It'll be stretchier or tighter depending on which method you use. And that's the main thing you're looking for when you're casting off. So you can see with this, I have a lot of tails now of yarn that I've joined when I first cast on. My last one here. So you can't just cut these or else the work will unravel. So you have to weave them in, and it's called weaving in the ends. To do that, you need a darning needle. So these are basically like sewing needles, just larger to fit yarn. So I have a metal one here, for example, and then also a plastic one. But you can get them like at any craft store, anywhere. And they're just basically a larger needle that will fit yarn. There may be different size, like a bigger one for thicker yarn or a smaller one for thinner yarn, but you could just get the larger ones and it'll work for most things. So yeah, I'll get started with that, and I'll show you a bit more close up how to weave in your ends so they look better and it's not too noticeable. Okay, so I'll start with the first tail that I have. This is when I first cast on my yarn, and you basically just thread your needle. Kind of difficult sometimes, but gets the job done. And to weave in, there's no really hard or fast rule on how you do this. It's just, trying to make it blend in, and you'll learn kind of what looks better on certain stitches. Some people will try and trace the stitches exactly, so you're trying to like match exactly what the knit stitch looks like. When I do garter stitch, I typically just kind of I use this ridged edge and go with that. So I'll start just kind of by going through one of the bumps here with your needle, and it's just like you're sewing, and you pull it through, and then I just go into the next bump in the opposite direction, pull it a little tight. You don't want to pull it too tight or it'll start to pucker your work, but just enough to hide it. And again, you can kind of go like anywhere you want that looks, hidden. You can go back if it's really noticeable. You can undo what you just did and find a better spot to hide the yarn. But this is how I usually weave in ends for garter stitch, is just kind of following the ridged edge. As so. But again, I've seen people do other things, like with a purl side, you could just go straight like through a couple stitches and pull it through. It would be noticeable on garter stitch, but on like just a purl, straight purling, it's not noticeable. So we can go over that in other videos when we do stockinette stitch. So once you've kind of gone, I usually try and do a little extra just in case. Once you've kind of made, a decent, like I went about an inch of just weaving this in, then you're pretty secure. It's unlikely that your yarn is going to totally unravel through all these stitches. So you're tight, and then the reason why you weave in the ends also, like this, is that it still is stretchy, like you're not affecting the tension of the yarn or anything when you do this. So by like weaving them in this way, it keeps your tension and doesn't pucker anything. So I just took off my needle, this is good enough. You should be fine, nothing should unravel. And then you can just go ahead and cut your yarn relatively close to the work. And then you kind of pull it and your end kind of gets hidden in all your stitches. And it's not too noticeable with this. The other thing is that if you're working with like a sweater or something like that where the right side and the wrong side are very different, you would want to weave in your ends on the wrong side, as I've done here. So if this was the inside of your sweater, you won't see anything. You're not going to be seeing this. It's not visible to anyone else. Whereas if you weave in your ends on the right side and it's the outside of your sweater, it could be a little noticeable, but it shouldn't be too big a deal either way. So we got our first one, no more ends there, and then we have 3 more to go. And then another thing is that where you joined your yarn, this is a good opportunity to kind of reinforce your loose edges. So I'll show you that really quick. So if we were going to weave in this end, you can see I have kind of a loose stitch here. So maybe I would go like up through this guy and tighten what's there. Try and like pull it a little, and hide that loose stitch. And I already got a little bit better just by kind of like filling in that gap. And then you can see I'm kind of stuck on the right side of the work here. This is the right side. So I'm going to continue by just going straight through. Anywhere really works as long as it looks okay, and that looked fine. And then now I'm back on the wrong side, and I'll do the same method for weaving in the ends on the wrong side. I'm just going through the ridge of purl stitches for garter stitch. Do a couple more. And there you go. I think that's pretty good there. And we can cut. And you can see I used when I was weaving it in, I stuck with the color that it matches, so it's not too noticeable. So when you weave in the pink one or a different color, you're going to want to stick up here where you weave in so it blends in. But other than that, that's pretty much the guidelines, and you should be all set for weaving in all your ends. Weaved in all our ends here. You can see nothing lingering, and basically the last step that any good knitter takes is to wash and block your finished object. So you can see what it looks like now. It's a little uneven at certain points, but blocking really helps to kind of like fluff up your knitting and fix any tension issues. Not if it's serious tension issues, but it will help with like the occasional loose stitch or something like that and evening everything out. So typically you can use like, you would soak it in cool water, most people recommend, with a wool wash, something that's wool safe. Usually has like lanolin or something in it. An example of one that I use is like Euclid brand, but there's many out there. There's some that have scents and some that are unscented for people that are sensitive. So you will soak it in the wool wash with cool water. It's usually a very small amount of detergent you use. Leave it there for it depends, but you can leave it there for a long time. I usually do like 15 or 20 minutes or something, and then you wring out the work and you set it up on, sometimes you can use like a towel to get rid of some of the excess water. You pat it dry a bit, and then you could, if you're really serious, pin it down in the shape that you want your finished object on some sort of like surface. They sell these blocking kits that are meant for this. You pin it down and kind of stretch it to the shape you want, or you can just let it dry on something that's like not going to absorb too much water. Like I sometimes will just use plastic bags since I'm in like in an apartment, don't have that much space, but you can put it on like an ironing board or something like that and let it dry out. And then it'll flatten everything out, and you'll be finished with your knitted project. Thanks so much.